I've been watching Palia ever since it was shown in a direct quite a while back now, but it was in a season where, let's be honest, we had about 1,500 farming sims. Now they waited a little while before they released this one, and it's now available completely free of charge on the Nintendo Switch eShop. I ignored it for its first couple of weeks until I noticed my daughter playing it, and she talked me into giving it a go, and I've got to say I think it's worth talking about, especially as when we looked online, there wasn't a great deal about it. So if the idea of a cozy Stardew-like game with some MMO components appeals to you, then we're about to find out if developer and publisher Singularity 6, who comprise of many industry veterans from companies like Blizzard, Epic, Riot Games, and a few others, have managed to pull it off. Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp. If you enjoy the content, then consider sticking around. Now, let's find out. There's an interesting storyline here. In Palia, you're basically a human in a world without humanity. This world is run by the Magiri, who are an elf-like race, and unlike the humans that lived there before, they live in harmony with nature. Well, that's the premise. I mean, they were pretty quick to sell me a bow and arrow and a fishing rod and point me towards Bambi. The storyline has you delving into mysterious locations and eventually finding out what happened with those humans that have gone missing. Now, you can do all of this on your own, or you can have a friend join you. You will see in some of this footage, it will be either my account or it will be my daughter's, and we're often playing side by side. I say playing side by side, I'll be hard at work and she'll be running around like a headless chicken. There's a reasonably robust character creation tool. You can choose your body type, a number of ridiculous haircuts, in my case that wasn't an issue, and change your voice, and a few other tweakable things. It works well enough, and there's a vast wardrobe of ludicrous clothes for you to don. The gameplay is split into a few quite familiar areas. There's an overworld that feels like it took some inspirations from certain Link and the Breath of His Wilds, particularly in some of the scenes, and there is a glider in here as well. Now, we are going to talk at some point in this review about some of the paid elements and what free really means for Palia, but before we do that, let's cover some of those other mechanics. So the open world has a map where you can look and see all of the characters that are currently available. Now, these are NPCs and it tracks their locations, which is useful if you need to find them for a quest line. On that subject, quests are handled in a reasonable way with a quest log, and it'll also show you all of those that you've completed before. So what do you actually do? Well, you can take that bow and arrow and you can go hunting, tracking down various creatures and animals and shooting them, gathering up their ingredients, which handily pop out of them in a small sack, and sell those at the local shop. You can go fishing in a number of different locations, and I have to say, it's very cool when you whip out your rod and start fishing, only for someone else to appear on the other side or nearby, and you're both fishing. It does give much more life to these types of experiences. I often find with things like Stardew, it's so much more enjoyable if I'm playing it in co-op. And here, where you have a server of 25 odd people, it's surprisingly busy. Now, the fishing minigame is straightforward enough. You follow the direction of the fish. This will affect how well you achieve the catch, and sometimes you'll get more rare fish which can be put into aquariums on your property. All of your tools can be selected in a handy wheel, another mechanic that we've seen introduced in a number of these types of games, but it works very well. And all of your tools will be upgraded eventually. Now, mining is the usual. Hold the button down and watch an animation as a progress bar fills on the screen. Not the most interesting. What is a little more in depth though is the way that you farm. This involves placing down pieces of land that can be tilled. You then get out the specific tool and you have to rake back the ground, and you're actually in control of this. They've used some kind of shader so that you can direct your hoe and gradually prepare each of these square sections. When enough of it is removed, you can then plant in that area. It's just a more interesting way of doing it. The same has to be said for watering. Now, planting is just standard. Throw the seed in the ground. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. Then you've got to water it. So you whip out your can and you've got freedom to just pour the thing and move around. It's not one of those robotic animations for pouring into each square, and I appreciate that. The more you do any of these things, be it mining, cutting down trees, planting crops, behind the scenes there are levels ticking up. Higher levels mean better gear, improved efficiency, and what feels like a natural progression. Rather than some games that rely on stamina, here Palia uses focus. What that means is that you're not going to suddenly drop down and fall asleep on the ground and return to your property, which I've got to be honest, I absolutely hate. Here you have a focus system or bar, which can be seen over here, and if you cook yourself up a tasty little treat, that will increase the amount of focus you have. What this does is affect the amount of experience you gain from doing any of the jobs in the world. That is a great idea. So the higher your focus, the more experience you get, and the more those things develop. As far as mechanics go and making a game fun, yeah, I have a lot of time for the focus mechanic. And it's not just food that increases that as well, you can actually increase it by performing quests, taking a little rest, or just chatting to NPCs, giving gifts, having a little chin wag, the things that are actually enjoyable in the game. And you can increase the amount of focus overall by upgrading your home and unlocking different perks. As you can probably tell, I just think that is a really good idea, but it's not all perfect. Now, I mentioned that we will speak about the free, in air quotes, nature of the game. You can go into a shop of sorts that uses real-world currency to allow you to buy some cosmetic items, and you can also buy, I think, some of the gliders in there. That's not an issue. I don't really care about that, to be honest, because I can ignore it and it's not in your face. And there's real-world currency in the game that you can easily earn by selling all of the things that you've either gathered or hunted, and you can do that in the shops, or you can put them in your box outside your house and, you know, the old standard Stardew mechanic. However, time is a very big mechanic in the game. Now, on the one hand, you could say, oh no, that's really bad. You actually have to wait an hour in real world time before the things in your sawmill are finished. And yeah, I'd kind of agree with you. But then on the other, you could say, well, actually, there are quite a few premium, full-played Nintendo games, Animal Crossing, that use time-based mechanics as a way of making the pacing of the game a little bit slower and I guess a little bit more relaxed. Now, if you're wanting to build things instantly, you're not going to get that here. And it's not like you're going to be sat there staring at the sawmill while this happens. You'll be going off on another adventure, doing other quest lines, etc, etc. But there will be certain things like building up a whole house that will take enough time that you will literally have to come back the next day. Now, the co-op mechanics or the multiplayer actually works really well. If you add a friend to your Nintendo Switch account, you can then search for their player name and it will bring them up. You can add them as a friend. They can join you on your own farm. You can give them permission to be an editor so they can plant things and help you out, again in air quotes, because what I had was someone stealing all my rocks and trees. But I do like this mechanic. There's also a guild function. You can start your own society. And all of this controls well. There is a run button, which is unusually placed on the Y button, but it's a toggle rather than having to hold it down. You can jump, you can climb up things, and obviously the gliding that I mentioned. While it is a little bit rough around the edges on Switch, the gameplay is actually really fun if you like this type of experience. As we're about to see in the performance section, not everything's quite as good. For me, I would give gameplay 16 out of 20, and the controls would also score 16 out of 20. Now, Palia has a full day-night cycle. This isn't done in real time, thankfully. It seems to be every hour or so that it changes, but at night time people will go off to bed. You can still accept and deal with quests, which is a real boon, honestly. You can go to the door and actually still talk to them as if they were awake, but it does, again, give it more life that there's that day-night cycle. It looks nice at certain times in handheld. It does look a little blurry, and performance seems to fluctuate around about 30 frames per second. However, I think the netcode, so that being the network code, does cause a few issues in that regard. Having all those players being calculated in their movements can introduce some performance hits, particularly when you're in the center of town. You'll see some stutters and some drops in frame rate, which when you're on your own farm, and obviously that's its own separate instance, you won't see that same slowdown. There have been a number of patches and improvements since it first came out, and it's already much better than it was, but there's still some work to do in that regard. I think it looks nice, and it also sounds really good. The soundtrack is excellent. Very relaxing, not repetitive, and I can quite happily sit and chill to this one. Visually and performance-wise, I'd give it 14 out of 20. Sound and audio, I would actually give 17 out of 20. Which takes me on to value. The game retails at, 0. It's zero, isn't it? Because it's a free game, but it does cost time. So that's the balance, isn't it, with these? I will say, as far as free games go, this doesn't feel like a free game. It feels like Stardew Valley with some slightly longer times for when you have to make certain things, but actually a lot of the crafting that you'll do at the crafting bench is instantaneous. With that in mind, I'm actually really quite impressed with the value this is offering to those that don't want to spend that money. You don't feel the pressure to do so. Now, whether much later in the game that becomes real, you know, and you've got to buy that specific outfit because you're going to, I don't know. I think it's a very good package for the zero price they're asking from you. And if you want to contribute by buying cosmetics, that's not really something I would, care about. If you want to, crack on. With that said, do I think it offers 20 out of 20 value? No, I don't, because it's still costing you a heck of a lot of time. And I think some of the lengths of some of the things you have to wait for are a little bit long. And as we know, time is money. So the value I think it offers the player overall is 16 out of 20. Palia is on a good path. Its early access that took place on PC has obviously done a lot to its overall gameplay. I still think there's more to be done, but it is enjoyable, and if you enjoy this style of game, you're going to have a great time. Performance on Switch, not the best and probably its weakest area, and it remains to be seen the longevity here. But still, I think it's worth trying out, and it gets a SwitchUp score of 79%. A massive thank you to my daughter, who put in significantly more hours since this came out than I did and was able to advise me on the scoring of this review. There you go, I'm training her up. Thanks so much to all of you that enjoy the content. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!